Magic of Java. This is my third book, called The Londo and the Green Queen's Revenge. It's a novel. It's a novel about me coming to terms with the attempted destruction of an Englishman and his Javanese family. But it is a novel. Yes, it's based on experience. It's based on real people and celebrities, but amalgams of real people or caricatures of them. So if you do identify yourself, please forgive me, because it's only intended as a yarn. The Ghosts of Shrewsbury Abbey. I began my last two episodes imploring you, the reader, to be charitable towards me and not to be too quick to judge my mental condition. But at the time of writing, my brain was clouded by heavy metal toxicity. I no longer feel this fog, and am no longer concerned about what you think of me. When it is our time to meet God, we need to free ourselves from all desires, and I include in this the vanity of caring how others perceive me. Perhaps there is a further reason for my callous disrespect of your opinions. You see, in seeking your approval, I was seeking reassurance that I was not mad. Now that I have convinced myself that I'm no madder than the next man, I no longer seek this reassurance, nor indeed seek your approval. No, please draw your own conclusions about me. This is a yarn designed to entertain you, and not a contrivance to convince you of my mental well-being, nor indeed my character. As with the first two episodes, this episode was thrust upon me. I no longer seek to explain myself, nor seek further knowledge, albeit that I cannot hide from it. But if my tale entertains, I can ask for no more. I was waiting on my passport from Indonesian immigration before visiting the UK to see my mother, who was ill, and my son, who is schizophrenic. You see, when my wife Mawar was hallucinating from lead poisoning, she made me promise to visit my mother as soon as I was able to. I eventually got my passport back, but the whole process of residency renewal took over 5 months and involved 4 visits to Jakarta, and in total cost me around $4,000. However, after 2 months, I had my passport with a 2-year exit re-entry visa, enabling me to visit the UK. But given that my residence lasts for 5 years, more opportunities to extort money from me and waste my time. Maybe I should temper my remarks, as renewing a UK passport from overseas is also a long-winded trauma, based on assumptions that we all have access to the same things as those living in the urban UK. I have to admit that with one's age, one's memories are those of our youth, or maybe not so much age, as my family and I nearly died some 7 months previously, and this has left me very reflective. So to me, the UK is sterilised milk in crown-top bottles, chip shops on winter nights fogged by steamed fat, warm pints of mild, cold winter mornings when Fords wouldn't start, cardinal red rag doorsteps, and above all, dancing all night in decrepit ballrooms. Not at all like the UK I had flown into, a Britain of Starbucks, McDonald's, craft beers, city apartments, BMWs and manufactured pop stars. Of course, it's in the high streets that echo this change to the greatest proportion. I recall half-day closing of McFisheries, electricity and gas showrooms. What exactly did they sell? Hepworths, Rumbelows, Green Shield stamp shops, but not the national milk bars, which stayed open. Little known today, the Beatles first met at their Liverpool branch. Then there are the even more distant memories of scabby knees, dog poo, often inexplicably white. Marbles. What's the time, Mr. Wolfe? Conkers. Albert Ramsbottom. Buttons A and B. Daleks. Being chased every holiday by fat girls from Bolton. Donald McGill postcards and the winter of 1962-63. First I went to Manchester to visit my son Branwell, or should I call it Ringway, Cheshire East, as Jakarta Airport is now bizarrely called Tangerang Banten. It would seem that Branwell has been as rude to all around him as he is to me, including my friend Patrick, who has offered him the hand of friendship. But I am left as the sole person willing to put up with his abuse, albeit often reluctantly. I say put up with his abuse, but on my first visit to his residence, I had made my excuses, as it was obvious that we would all end up hurling insults, despite me being so much calmer than before. After praying, I went round the next morning to give him the money I had for him, which he spent almost immediately on skunk. Branwell's explanation that he had brain damage from deliberately and repeatedly hitting his head against a wall in Amsterdam. Apparently some girls from Manchester High School had sent him to Coventry, or Tangerang Banten as I have now renamed it, and this had been his reaction. So Branwell did not blame me for his disability, but for leaving him with his evil mother. How I have tortured myself, thinking that I was some way responsible for his problems. And whilst I understood his point about leaving him with his mother, there was nothing I could have done. Branwell's mother had claimed sole guardianship over him and prevented me from seeing him when he was at his worst. She, with his psychiatric team, had even planted the suggestion that my presence in England wasn't helping with his recovery, and I reluctantly agreed with them to leave, but not before offering Branwell the opportunity to live with me in Manchester. And I would forget about my new East Indonesian family, at least until he was better. But he chose his mother. He was still very confused, and now has no recollection of this gesture. Although nor does he recall any sacrifices I made for him or happy times from his childhood. So Branwell was snatched from me by his mother. I'd never abandoned him, as he believes, but once again he has used his own mother. He was used by his own mother in her games with me. You can see my egotism is such that not only do I think that the events I have described revolve around me, I have also tortured myself for being responsible for the misfortunes of those around me. Whilst of course my interaction with and between Branwell and his mother contributes towards his circumstances, but like us all, he and his mother have free will. Nonetheless, without my ego, I would not believe my experiences to be in any way unusual, worth repeating to you. Indeed, I am so narcissistic that I believe you will want to read about them. No better than posting photographs of myself on Instagram. Not that I ever do. Now Branwell expects me to leave my Indonesian family and return to the UK to look after him, as my mother does. Branwell's mother not only threw him out of the home I left for them both, but has now stopped sending him money altogether. He is all alone in the world and frightened. Worse still, it would seem that she might have kept at least some of the $40,000 my father and I left him for university, which he has deferred for another 2 years further. He says that he no longer wants to live in a single student room and wants a car, like his old school friends already have. I am worried that he is so deluded that he will end up sleeping rough, as he seems incapable of looking after himself on less than $25,000 per annum, which I can no longer provide, although I'm not sure I ever could have. Comparing himself to his old school friends makes Branwell depressed and somewhat suicidal. When I got to Shrewsbury, my mother was nothing like as bad as I'd been led to believe, although had been very ill. Now she once again delighted in trying to annoy me, but I'm much calmer than I was the previous year. Just maybe I can overcome my inner child, stop seeking my parents' approval, and finally grow up. Nevertheless, I was completely unable to have a meaningful conversation with my mother, as she is totally disinterested in planning for our future, or in contemplating any changes in his circumstances. Being realistic, both of which mean her death. In fact, my mother has given up on the art of conversation and simply talks to anyone within sight, which is now increasingly few. She has also developed selective deafness, only hearing what she wants to, even completely misinterpreting what others say, and being adamant that it is her interpretation which is correct. So I spent 2 weeks listening to a word salad based on the same stories she tells every time we meet, such as her coming second in Miss Shropshire in 1953 and her complaining of new medical conditions. On this visit, it was a broken back. As I walked to Jumatan Friday prayers, I waited a while in Shrewsbury Abbey graveyard. Not as macabre as it sounds, as the abbey and its graveyard straddle my route to the masjid or mosque and have no perimeter walls. In fact, the graveyard contains many benches where people rest. The Duncow pub opposite the abbey is reputably one of the most haunted in Shrewsbury, but there are not so many stories about the abbey itself. Nevertheless, I became aware of ghosts in the graveyard. This was the first time as an adult I had experienced the Fortean in the UK, but once again I wasn't one bit frightened. I say paranormal experience as an adult in the UK, but I am yet to confirm the true nature of the gaunt attendant in a dinner jacket who I used to see in a downstairs toilet at Wigan Casino. In fact, the Abbey ghosts wanted to communicate with me, and I received a message that all was not what it seemed. They seemed interested in my clothing and attitudes from this century, with a sense of incongruity in where I lived, my religion, calling me Mohammedan. While certainly not frightening, there was something about these ghosts which put me on my guard. Maybe I have more in common with Indonesian ghosts from the last century than what I presumed to be Elizabethan English ghosts. I later found that most of the graves are from the early Victorian period. So does this disprove my vision? Maybe, or maybe believing the graves to be Elizabethan, I interpreted what we normally cannot see and not within our experience as being Elizabethan ghosts. Not only was this my first contact with ghosts in the UK, but the first I had seen since I believed I was getting better, and since I had knowingly consumed any get lead. After my father died, I spotted him one early morning outside his house in his grey cardigan, but was told by my friend Kipper of an elderly man who walks round the estate in the early morning, which again leads me to wonder if we see what we allow ourselves to consider possible. The next day, I was walking past Shrewsbury Cemetery, and the ghosts of a young boy and girl, possibly twins, explained to me that they were frightened of the cemetery, and I instinctively told them that they could remain with me, but they should not be afraid. I then had a crisis of confidence. Were the young boy and girl not what they seemed? and had I invited malevolent spirits to possess me. Whilst even this was not one bit frightening, I was concerned that they would inhibit Mawar once I saw her, and that this would frighten her. I explained that they should return if they intended to possess Mawar, but I have no idea what actually happened. Then finally I saw a ghost walk past the window of my mother's house. A bell rang, presumably on the television, and I opened the door with nobody, not even a ghost, now in sight. A few minutes earlier I'd been to Kipper's house, but he was out. Now here's the strange thing. This ghost looked a little like Kipper. As always, I didn't get a full, clear view of the ghost, and certainly did not feel that it was a message about Kipper. More likely just reflecting a degree of anxiousness that he was out. I don't know what to make of these events, nor how to explain them, but do know that it is better not to dwell on them and simply to return to a cycle of paranoia. Although Kipper did come round later, so maybe it was simple precognition. During prayers at my mother's house, the message that things were not what they seemed was repeated, and I speculated that I'd been sent to the UK not to see my mother, but Branwell. It made perfect sense that Branwell was in more immediate danger than my mother, in spite of her broken back. I resolved that however abusive Branwell was to me, that I needed to do everything I could for him. Undoubtedly he would not think this was enough, but I love him. This was against all the advice of almost everyone I know, including my cousin, who used to be a compassionate bloke. All explained to me that at 22 he had to stand on his own 2 feet, and Branwell needed to be shocked into doing so. Although on reflection, that had been exactly my strategy in taking him to university and away from his mother, and it had backfired so dramatically. When walking to Jumatan the next week, I considered Branwell once more, not least as most people were advising me to have nothing more to do with him. It's a long walk, especially with my gout returning, as it always does around Ramadan. I do hope I can walk at the airport and sit on the night bus, as I am desperate to be with my wife, Mawar. During this walk, I wondered if Branwell wasn't as well as he maintained, and that either his mother was once again using him to punish me, or if she and a social worker had a plan to force him into sheltered accommodation. But he needs to know that I care, however difficult this is from Java, unless he can be persuaded to join me in Gununkeedle. Also on reflection, I know that for too long I have always sought, but not always listened to the advice from others on a whole range of issues. I need to grow up and be confident in my own decision, not listening to the glib statements of others. They're taking a piss. They need to be taught a lesson. They will think you're weak. You're allowing them to walk all over you. You see, I have listened to such advice, and it has got me nowhere and depressed, as my inner self has cautioned me to be more compassionate. As I listened to Branwell talking about aliens and his conviction that those who knew the truth about aliens, including numerous celebrities, would ultimately come to his rescue, I realised that he was seeking explanations for his experiences, just as I have. We're both intelligent people who have had our realities snatched from us. Of course, we will seek explanations for what has happened. As I listened further, Branwell's explanations were almost identical to my own. I had looked to the past and the spirit world, and he, aliens and technology. But these were simply archetypes. My flying demons became his flying saucers. In all probability, these are oversimplifications of a reality which we would find difficult to contemplate, let alone understand. Both of us have had experiences which to us are very real, and we cling on to there being some meaning to them, other than hallucinations and madness. We have read much of the same literature, especially Jung and Nietzsche, and watched the same YouTube videos. But I stopped or turned off when conspiracies or aliens are proposed. Nevertheless, my own explanations certainly would not rule out adding an additional twist of another intelligent life form, with its technology bridging the physical and the metaphysical. After all, I believe in God, whilst Muslims believe in jinn, and even Western atheists would probably agree that theoretically another entity can have more consciousness than a human. But deep down, my real reason for not pursuing alien explanation is I believe that we are all one, and at one with the universe. To look towards a higher consciousness of aliens is extending the myth of the self. Maybe I really am uniquely placed to support Branwell. Branwell is no more insane than I. Or put another way, we're as mad as each other. And we need to support each other to integrate back into the reality we both believed to have been unitary, but now understand is far from it. Indeed, we know it to be limited and subjective. Like those returning to Plato's cave, we are now thought to be deranged, but Plato shows us that we should question this. This is exactly the same way, maybe more so, does Mawar need me. Mawar, her daughter Titi, and I share a most incredible experience, one in which we thought we were dead or about to become dead. As we integrate back into the mundane, we must encourage each other to take another step into what has become the unknown, but is reality to everyone else, the inside of the cave. In fact, to a large extent, all that I have written is my attempt to understand what has happened to Mawar. Then I realised that I was experiencing the same, and I also felt that one day it might be of help to Branwell. I have sought the truth because we have an evolutionary impulse for an existential equilibrium, so that our beliefs align with reality, however misguided this may be. Mawar made me promise to visit my mother as soon as I could. I even had a premonition that my mother would die whilst I was in the UK. I so believed this, I left Mawar with extra money in case I was delayed. I had also had a premonition that my office sale would complete when in the UK. It didn't, but it did 2 weeks later. But often my premonitions simply warn of major events, and I misinterpret the specific event to which they refer, and certainly the timing is imprecise. So again, is this all about Branwell and not my brother? I have found him contemplating suicide and approaching homelessness. He needs to know that I at least care about him. So have all my experiences been leading me to this? The black magic and the poisoning, just alerting me to the actions of my former partner? I have always refused to see her as evil, continually prepared to accept that I was every bit as responsible, maybe even more so, for our breakup. Nevertheless, I have learnt that people can behave in evil ways without any provocation. But did Mawar really need to suffer so much to alert me to Branwell's needs? Then again, what can I realistically do? I am also left questioning, am I really so bad at singing, dancing, taking photos, and a huge list of other activities my former partner constantly berated me about? Or were these attempts to undermine me, as now it is so obvious how she has undermined Branwell, leaving him unable to function as an adult? Of course they were to undermine me. She even made me doubt my love of William Blake and Samuel Palmer, despite prior to us meeting, having spent every visit to London marvelling at their etchings in a darkened room. In fact, over the 20 years we were together, I had given up, even doubted, every pastime I once loved and which had defined me. On returning to Indonesia, I found Mawar's smile and dancing eyes has returned, and I fell in love with her over again. It became clear to me that Mawar's recovery was dependent on her feeling secure in my love for her and us enjoying lovemaking as we had so regularly in the past. And so we began to experience each other's intimacy anew. However, from being almost slim 3 months previously, Mawar was as big as I'd ever seen her. In fact, she had muscles, something I had never seen her with. Before I left for the UK, Maspoa had spotted her becoming stocky, but now she was nothing like Made, the name she used before losing her mind through lead poisoning. Given the muscle pains we've endured for so long, are these another of the effects of the lead poisoning? Or quite possibly, are we also suffering from mercury poison, which has many similar symptoms to lead? Mercury, along with many potential heavy metal poisons, is along with lead commonly used in textile finishing. Indeed, mercury was responsible for the occurrence of Mad Hatter's disease in Stockport and Luton, where hats were finished. The man affected is easily upset and embarrassed, loses all joy in life, and lives in constant fear of being dismissed from his job. He has a sense of timidity and may lose self-control before visitors. Thus, if one stops to watch a man in a factory, he will sometimes throw down his tools and turn in anger on the intruder, saying he cannot work if watched. Occasionally, a man is obliged to give up work because he can no longer take orders without losing his temper, or if he is a foreman, because he has no patience with the men under him. Buckle et al. Chronic mercury poisoning. Mercury is released by coal combustion, the main source of electricity in Indonesia, often low-grade and more polluting brown coal and lignite, and also used in small gold mining operations, so common in Indonesia. Mercury in the atmosphere particularly contaminates fish, which are widely eaten. In fact, pregnant mothers in Indonesia have the highest levels of mercury toxicity in the world. Of course, mercury is also the traditional treatment for syphilis. So much is known of its effects, not least, supposedly, from celibate Augustine friars from the land of green ginger, who deflected their part in spreading syphilis by blaming Native Americans, and more recently, prostitutes from Naples. Now, who would have thought that syphilis and fake news originate in Hull? After a fortnight of pondering how heavy metals could give Mawar muscles, I realised that the contraceptive injection she now took was the most likely cause. It also occurred to me that the fat was caused by the strong psychotropic medicines. Indeed, the same happened to Branwell. Mawar says that she will never be slim again, but I need my Made back. So yes, Branwell and Mawar need me to love them and to provide a gentle intellectual steer, but Mawar and I need each other to face the changing effects of heavy metal toxicity. Certainly I have been suffering from arthritis and headaches for 2 months now, including all the time that I was in the UK, but only Mawar really understands and believes me. Kiki, Mawar's stepson's wife, has been incarcerated despite being pregnant, but he was released by the police when it became known that he was not involved in the crime, albeit that Kiki had enjoyed the proceeds of the crime. But as this included numerous European holidays, Kiki was not suspicious, given that his wife worked in a travel agent's. All of Kiki's assets have been seized to repay the money she took, and he has lost his job. So he now lives with my stepdaughter Titi and works as an Ojek motorcycle taxi driver. Is there a symmetry in all this? Mawar's ex-husband, Prama's somewhat ill-gotten gains came to nothing in just 2 generations. As we all know, there is a tendency for everything to destroy itself once the original impetus is gone. In Oldham, people say, clogs to clogs in 3 generations. In Jakarta, it would seem even quicker. Kiki's Dukan, shaman aunt, and his mother received no reward for their plotting and treachery, which some would say killed Mawar's ex-husband Prama. Nor, of course, did Mawar enjoy any of the benefits of Prama's wealth, despite being the longest suffering and loyalist family member, with Titi a close second. Now, in spite of my impoverishment, I probably am the richest family member, but feel no jubilation whatsoever. Believe me, I know there is no justice in seeing a life destroyed, but in Kiki's case there could be some irony. Of course, this means that I really do have to pay for Titi's university, if she is able to complete her schooling. For once I can say, with certainty, none of this is about me. It's a series of destructive events and greed, which I inherited when I married Prama's 4th wife. Immediately after writing this, my son threatened to kill himself again unless I paid for him to move into a hotel, and a snag has emerged on the sale of my former office. Only 3 months ago I would have believed that there was a significance to these problems emerging at the same time. But in the UK it's midday on a Tuesday, probably the peak time for issues to emerge. It's just coincidence. Not everything will go as I want for the rest of my life, but I should be happy and content that I live in a beautiful place with a beautiful wife, and let everything else be ripples across the sands of my existence. 2 hours after writing this, contracts were exchanged on the office, some 21 months after I thought I had sold it. 2 days later, I heard that my former partner had approached Patrick to give him the share certificates my father had given to Branwell as a part of the $45,000 to which I referred, as she no longer wanted anything to do with her son. So whilst not a palatable solution for my son, at least there is some clarity. But clarity on what? Why ponder? Just enjoy the expiration from the torment. Well, that concludes this chapter from my book, The Londo and the Green Queen's Revenge, which is my 3rd book in the series. I do hope you've enjoyed it. I'm hoping to add further chapters about every week, and so far I've managed to do this. If you'd like to hear more from me, then please subscribe and hit the bell. That way you get notifications of when a new chapter is released. In addition, I don't seem to be working very well with these algorithms on YouTube, and my videos really aren't being promoted as they should. So if you could also hit the like button and sort of make some comments, I think that will help me to get noticed. I hate to ask you that, but I really do need more viewers. But thank you for this viewing. Thank you so much.